In the quiet village of Royal Leamington Spa, England, a baby was born on October 12th, 1875. He would grow up to be many things: a poet, a mountaineer, an occultist, a magician, and a man feared by governments and churches alike. His name was Edward Alexander Crowley. The world would come to know him simply as Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed Beast 666, the prophet of a new religion, and the man dubbed by the British press as the wickedest man in the world. But was he truly evil, or simply a misunderstood rebel? This is his story.
Welcome to The Hidden Scrolls, where we focus on history, folklore, and mythology.
Crowley was born into privilege. His father, a strict member of the Plymouth Brethren, was a wealthy brewery heir who raised young Edward in a household filled with fire and brimstone Christianity. By age 8, his father died, and that moment shattered something inside him. He began to question everything: the Bible, morality, authority. Where others saw sin, Crowley saw power. At 12, he was already writing dark poetry. At 14, he lost his virginity to a maid. He claimed he tasted sin and found it sweet. When he enrolled at Cambridge University, he dropped his first name and adopted the moniker Aleister, a Gaelic twist, he said, to make himself sound more magical, more mythic. But while his classmates studied law or literature, Crowley was obsessed with something else: the occult. In 1898, Crowley stumbled upon a book by the mysterious A.E. Waite, a name you might recognize from the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. That book led him to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an elite magical society whose members included artists, poets, and even future creators of Sherlock Holmes and Dracula. The Golden Dawn practiced ceremonial magic, rituals, invocations, alchemy, and esoteric mysticism. To Crowley, it was a doorway to divinity. He soared through their ranks, much to the resentment of older, more conservative members, including the poet W.B. Yeats, who hated him. Why? Because Crowley wasn't just practicing magic, he was flaunting it: rituals involving blood, drugs, and sex. He wasn't interested in hiding power. He wanted to become it. In 1904, Crowley and his new wife, Rose, traveled to Cairo, Egypt. What happened there would define the rest of his life. According to Crowley, Rose fell into a trance and began speaking in the voice of an ancient entity. She told him, "They are waiting for you." On April 8th, 9th, and 10th, Crowley claimed to receive a revelation dictated by a being named Aiwass, a supernatural intelligence he believed to be his holy guardian angel. The result was a short book called The Book of the Law, and it introduced the central tenet of Crowley's new religion: "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This wasn't just a motto, it was a declaration of war on conventional morality. Crowley believed each person had a true will, a cosmic destiny, and any force, religious or political, that stood in the way was evil. Thus, Thelema was born. By the 1920s, Crowley had declared himself the prophet of a new age, the Aeon of Horus. He moved to Sicily and founded the Abbey of Thelema, a commune devoted to spiritual liberation through ritual magic, psychedelic drugs, and sacred sexuality. But this wasn't your average hippie paradise. Residents were required to confront their darkest desires. Walls were covered with explicit murals. Rituals involved bodily fluids, animal sacrifices, and hours-long orgies meant to transcend the ego and invoke divine energies. The British tabloids caught wind and branded him the wickedest man in the world. One man died under mysterious circumstances at the Abbey. The Italian government expelled Crowley, Mussolini himself wanted nothing to do with him. Crowley's name was now radioactive. As the years dragged on, Crowley's fame faded. His books sold poorly. He was addicted to heroin and broke. He lived in cheap boarding houses, sometimes surviving on the generosity of disciples who still called him the Master Therion. But his ideas didn't die. They seeped into the culture, hidden in the margins. Musicians, mystics, artists, all whispered his name. In 1947, Crowley died in Hastings, England. Only a handful of mourners attended his funeral, where they read aloud passages from the Book of the Law. He died as he lived, alone, misunderstood, and surrounded by mystery. Today, Aleister Crowley is a cult icon, a figure carved into the mountain of alternative history, right alongside Rasputin and Tesla. You'll find his influence in the music of Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, David Bowie. He's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He inspired the creation of modern Wicca, chaos magic, even parts of Scientology. His writings, especially magic in theory and practice, are still studied by occultists and ritual magicians. But his legacy is double-edged. To some, he was a revolutionary who liberated human consciousness. To others, a narcissistic monster who cloaked ego in mysticism. So, who was Aleister Crowley? A visionary or a madman? A mystic or a fraud? A prophet or simply a man who refused to kneel? He shattered the moral codes of his time, but not out of mindless rebellion, rather to forge a new path, one where the soul wasn't punished for seeking ecstasy, knowledge, and power. But with great freedom comes great peril, and Crowley walked that line, sometimes crossing it. Maybe Crowley was neither angel nor demon. Maybe, like most of us, he was just a man, desperately trying to become more. So now we're left with a question, one that haunts the edge of history and myth. Who was Aleister Crowley? A magician, a prophet, a libertine, a fraud, a genius, a walking contradiction. He defied his time with fire and ritual, with ink and blood, with a voice that roared against conformity and whispered secrets from forgotten gods. He lived in pursuit of the divine and the damned, sometimes finding both in the same mirror. Some say he opened doors that should have stayed shut. Others say he gave us the keys to liberation. He claimed to hear spirits. He wrote books no one could fully decode. He climbed mountains no man had dared. And he fell from heights no one could survive. But more than anything, Crowley was a mirror for a world wrestling with the death of old gods and the birth of new freedoms. A world in transition, from empire to entropy, from blind faith to individual power. His life was not a roadmap, it was a warning, a siren song, not to follow, but to awaken. Because in every man who seeks to command the cosmos, there's a little madness. And in every rule breaker, there's a spark of the divine.